Welcome to Gold FM Speak Your Mind special interview. It is Europa Day this Friday, the 9th of May, and I'm really grateful that the head of the delegation of the European Union here in the Pacific, after a hectic schedule for the last couple of days, has managed to come for this special interview. So we welcome Ambassador Andrew Jacobs to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's always great to be on air and on FBC.
Now, I hear that you got in early this morning.
Yeah. Well, I arrived yesterday. I was away for 2 weeks in the North Pacific. A heavy travel schedule, but a fascinating trip.
I can imagine. Now, Europe Day on this week, on Friday, the 9th of May. How important and what is the significance for the Fijian, regular Fijian watching the show this evening? Now, what is the significance of Europe Day?
Well, Europe Day the 9th of May celebrates a speech which was made in 1950, so 65 years ago, a speech made by Robert Schuman, who was the French foreign minister at the time. Mm-hmm. And in this speech he envisaged, and it was only 5 years after the Second World War, and he envisaged a Europe in which war would be unthinkable among the European countries. And that was really the seeds of the European Union being born. And 7 years later, the first European Economic Community was established, bringing together originally 6 European countries. There are now 28. And we celebrate Europe Day around the world every year. And it gives us the opportunity also to focus not only on the European Union, but also our relationship with Fiji, our relationship with the Pacific, and we put on a number of events which help to make people more aware of what Europe is, what the European Union is, and how the European Union and Fiji and the rest of the Pacific work together.
Now, Europe, when you mention European Union in the Pacific, immediately, and this is the reality on the ground, people immediately think dollar signs. And there's a lot of cooperation and assistance that the European Union provides for various countries and communities across the Pacific, including Fiji. Why does the European Union continue to do this?
Well, I hope that people will think not dollar signs, but perhaps euro signs.
Euro signs, absolutely.
But I think we do provide a lot of support to the Pacific for development cooperation. The Pacific is an important partner. There are a lot of challenges in the Pacific linked particularly to climate change, to the resilience of communities. There's a lot of support that we are providing, and we're very proud of that partnership. But the European Union's relations with the Pacific are much broader than just being based on money and on development assistance. Climate change is a very good example. We do provide support to try to mitigate the negative consequences of climate change, but we also stand side by side with the Pacific countries in the climate change negotiations. Like the Pacific, like Fiji, we consider it extremely important at a big climate change meeting, which is taking place in Paris this year, to have legally binding emissions targets agreed for all the countries of the world. And I think that's a good example of the way in which the Pacific and the European Union are working closely together on the world stage. So it's not just about development cooperation. I think it's about how we can work together to change things, to make things better across the globe.
Well, for Fiji, 2017 is a very important year. Why? Because the EU's sugar preferential pricing is concluded. And what is already the European Union is working with various stakeholders. And what I'd like to ask is, how's that work going? Which stakeholders are you working with? And how does the European Union will continue this support to the industry?
Well, you're right. 2017 is going to be a very important year for Fiji and for Fiji's sugar. The World Trade Organization told the European Union that we could no longer have a preferential system in place for African, Caribbean and Pacific sugar producers. At the moment there is a, let's say, controlled market in the European Union in which European domestic sugar beet producers have quotas on the amount that they can grow and sell. And that will finish in 2017. So it's very likely that the prices in Europe for sugar will come down. The market will remain fully open for Fijian sugar, but the market will become more competitive. So we're very committed now to working very closely with the Fiji sugar industry, with the government, on trying to increase competitiveness, trying to, let's say, make the harvesting processes more streamlined, to make transportation to the mills quicker, so that the production costs are reduced and the sugar can be sold at more competitive prices.
Now, for the farmer that's watching this evening show, how can they, how much more simpler can you break it down for them? Does this assist them?
Well, the assistance that we are providing, at the moment we've been working very much through non-governmental organizations. We've been working with FRIEND, for example. We've been working with the Ramakrishna Foundation. We've been working with other NGOs really to help benefit those working working as farmers in the sugar belt. Helping to develop additional crops which are additional to sugar, to give them additional sources of income. And it's very satisfying to go to a supermarket in Suva and find products with a FRIEND label on them, and which are produced by farmers who are now, let's say, having an additional income. Since the elections in September last year, we have stepped up our support to Fiji, and we're just putting together a new program of support in the sugar sector, working with the FSC, working with the government, really focusing on competitiveness. And I think what we're going to be looking at particularly are harvesting techniques, as I say, transportation and so on. We're also, at the moment, we've just recently launched a program on forestation to help plant more forests, to protect the land which is currently growing sugar, again so that there are more sugar yields. We've been working very closely with the Sugar Research Institute of Fiji to develop new strains of sugar cane which are more resilient and so on. So there are a number of things that we're doing. And we're very encouraged that all those working in the sugar industry really do seem to be conscious of the challenge that 2017 represents. I can't say it's not going to be tough, but everybody is really very, very prepared to step up to the mark and really try to ensure that after 2017, Fiji Sugar is competing in a marketplace which is, quite honestly, going to be tougher. Yeah.
How do you feel the feedback from those stakeholders on the ground that you are working with? How do you feel? Are they positive about this?
Yes, certainly. We have very good stakeholder meetings, and certainly the support that we've been providing, I think, does really match some of the priorities that the farmers and other stakeholders have. As I say, now we're sort of stepping up our support, so I'm sure that also will be very much in line with government strategy, very much in line with what the industry wants, and will really help to overcome the challenges that are certainly there.
Now, you mentioned earlier that we'll work on climate change and the effects of climate change. You've just returned from a visit in the North Pacific. Now, how did that fare? And I'm assuming there are various projects on climate change that the EU is working in, not only in Fiji, but right across the Pacific.
Yeah.
How can you tell us a little bit about the projects on the ground?
Well, yeah, I just came back from the North Pacific. I visited the Marshall Islands. I visited the Federated States of Micronesia, both Ponape and Yap State, and I also went to Palau. These are all countries which we work with from here in Suva. Suva is very much our regional base, but we cover 11 countries from here, and we also cover 4 European overseas countries and territories, New Caledonia, French Polynesia, and so on. But in the north, I took the opportunity when I was in Yap State in Micronesia to go and visit some of the islands that were recently very badly hit by Typhoon Mesak. And it was extremely distressing to see the level at which the communities had been really destroyed. It was a real miracle in Yap that there were no people killed. I know that in Chuk State there were fatalities, but in Yap nobody was killed. But houses are all down, trees are all down, there's no more breadfruit trees, the coconut trees are down, and so on. So the people have a real problem in trying to recover, trying to make sure that they have foodstuffs that are growing, trying to make sure that everybody has a roof over their head, and so on. And we are providing support to help them recover. But one of the things I think we need to do much more of in the short term, but also in the medium term, is to help communities become more resilient to climate change. So where we know that there are risks, for example, of rising water, to help build defences, to help ensure that there are strains of crops which are more resilient to salination, for example, because as the sea levels rise, more salt gets into the water table, and you need crops which are going to be able to cope with that. We need to build more shelters for cyclones, for typhoons, and all of these things we are doing across the Pacific. I know that in Fiji there have been communities which unfortunately have already had to move to higher ground, and I know that that is something that the government is working on. But certainly our focus is very much on mitigation and adaptation, so helping communities to cope with climate change. I mean, we can't make it go away. We can, through international negotiations, try to reduce emissions targets and try to prevent the effects of climate change getting even worse. But one of the messages that we really are trying to get across in Europe is that climate change and the problems of climate change are not for tomorrow in the Pacific, they are for today. This is happening now. And the European Union is a close ally, as I say, of the Pacific in really pushing the global agenda on climate change, really trying to make sure that things are done, that agreements are struck at the COP21, the big climate change meeting in Paris at the end of December. That is going to be an opportunity which must not be missed. We must make sure that all countries of the world do sign up to legally binding targets to get emissions down, so that the rise in temperature really slows down, so that communities are not threatened more than they already are.
Now, looking at with this big meeting that's coming up, how is the response back in Europe? With what your reports obviously go back to Europe, how have they been received?
Oh, very well. I think there's a lot of understanding of the challenges now in the Pacific. As I say, it's something that we've been working on. And there was a visit. President Anotitong of Kiribati was in Brussels a couple of months ago. We made sure that he met our High Representative for Foreign Policy, Federica Mogherini. He was able to tell her directly, what it's like in Kiribati, what the problems are in Tarawa. And I think that the message is getting through. It's very helpful for my colleagues in Brussels to know what the direct challenges are, and I think that makes us all even more committed to work closely with the Pacific, not only to provide financial assistance, but also to stand with the Pacific in making sure that things change across the international agenda.
Well, one of the key cornerstones of the European Union has been renewable energy.
Yeah.
You're involved in a lot of projects. Can we just highlight a little bit about the work here in the Pacific?
Yeah, certainly one of the things that we've been doing, and I have the North Pacific fresh in my mind because I was just up there. There we have had a program which has been working with the 3 North Pacific countries, with Federated States of Micronesia, Republic of the Marshall Islands, and Palau, which has brought electricity for the first time to many outer islands. I think there are around 7,500 people in the Marshall Islands who now have electricity for the first time. And it's difficult to imagine how important that is and what a difference this makes to people's lives. In the evenings now, there is light. People can study, people can work. It's fundamentally changed the way people work. They can now have refrigerators, they can now store food. And it's easy, let's say, to forget that there are millions of people around the world who don't have access to electricity. But we're working on renewable energy not only because it does provide electricity to those populations who haven't had it, but also because the Pacific Islands, and Fiji is no exception, are spending a huge amount of money on diesel fuel, on non-renewable fuel. So the more we can get solar panels up and running, solar arrays, other forms of renewable energy, the better it is, not only for the environment but for the economy. I was in the Federated States of Micronesia last week, where we have supported the rehabilitation of a hydro plant, which is saving huge amounts of money for the state of Ponape. So renewable energy, I think it's an area where the European Union has a great deal of experience. We've done a great deal of work across the Pacific already, and it is an area where I think our cooperation has been very successful.
Now, another key area that you also promote is water and sanitation.
Indeed, yes.
Yes, and so now there, again, from your trip in the Northern Pacific and also here in Fiji, what's the work been like, and what types of, we can also look at some of the projects?
Well, talking again about the more remote communities, and when I was in Yap State last week, in some of the islands which had been very badly hit by Typhoon Maysak, I was there when big household water tanks that we've been providing through the SPC. A lot of our projects around the Pacific are implemented with the support of the Secretariat of the Pacific Community, and there were huge family water tanks coming in from a boat onto these islands just in the state of Yap, in order to provide households with the possibility to store water. Again, to help them to be more resilient, to help them to overcome the challenges, which really relate to droughts, to not having a reliable supply of water. And again, the difference that this can make to communities is really very striking.
How do we get these images? How much more can Pacific Islanders get these images across, from your observation, with what you've just seen, get it across to the rest of the world?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm very pleased that this year, 2015, is the European Year for Development. So the European Union is really focusing through this label on informing European taxpayers, so the people in the European Union who pay for this development cooperation, what we're doing around the world, and at the same time informing them about the challenges that we're helping to overcome. We were very pleased in the European Union when we carried out a survey a few months ago about development cooperation, and we found that over 80% of European people thought that development cooperation was a good thing for the European Union to do. Over 65%, I think, felt that development cooperation should be increased, which was quite surprising given that a lot of European countries are suffering financially. It's not an easy time, but they felt that it was important to even increase the money spent on development cooperation. But around half of the people that we spoke to had no idea what we were doing in development cooperation at the moment. So European Year for Development is a great opportunity for us to focus on that. We've had different themes for different months. This month of May is peace and security. Last month was health. The month before that was education, and so on. And we've been working to send stories back to Europe to publicise some of the great things that we've been doing. In Fiji, for instance, through the program that we've been implementing through the NGO Friend, there is a lady who established, with financial support, a beekeeping, a honey making business, which has been very successful. A story which is very striking because her life and that of her family has been fundamentally changed by these bees. And it's a story that we sent back to Brussels. It was very well received. It's in Bar. She lives in Bar, and we've had a lot of interest for that. But I think it is very important for us to show to people back in Europe not only what the challenges are in the Pacific, but also how the European Union is providing support, how the European Union is engaged. It's true, I think, that in Europe, if you say the Pacific Island countries, the images are swaying palm trees, beautiful beaches, and fortunately there is that. But there are also a lot of challenges that need to be overcome. And I know that Pacific governments like Fiji's are working very hard on the development agenda, on helping to make people's lives better. And the EU is there as a very close partner in this endeavour.
Now, another area that the EU also looks at and works in supporting the UNDP in addressing is justice. Right. Recently, the European Union was supportive through the UNDP of sending our brand new elected parliamentarians on a tour. Yes. Could you just talk a little bit about this and expand, I guess, the EU looking at more work in this area, perhaps?
Yes, I'm very pleased at the program that is being implemented by the UNDP, supported by the EU, but also by Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. Really helping the relatively newly established Parliament to do its job as well as it can. And yes, there was a study tour of the Parliament of the UK, the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly. It was about 6 weeks ago. I think that the Speaker went, Minister Tikunduadua, the Leader of the Opposition, and the Secretary of the Parliament, and I think they came back having really had first-hand information and, let's say, a first-hand view of how parliaments work in other countries. Fiji follows the Westminster parliamentarian system, so it was, I think, very appropriate for them to go to the UK. No, there've been also trips to New Zealand, to Australia, I think to Victoria Parliament, which is, I think, very important. I think one of our priorities in working let's say, with the Fijian authorities post-elections, is really to help these institutions which safeguard democracy, which work on governance issues, to make them as strong, as effective as possible. And in our new programme for Fiji, which will cover the period from now until 2020, we will continue working on sugar and agriculture, but we also intend to work in the field of governance, particularly justice. Helping the justice system to, let's say, work as effectively as possible. And I'm very pleased that we've had, very good preparatory discussions on the programs that we hope soon to implement.
Apart from just working with the parliamentarians, you're also looking at other programs in perhaps good governance in the education institutions?
Yes. Well, I think one of the things that we're very keen on ensuring is that different development partners who are working with a partner country, let's say, have clearly defined areas of competence. I mean, we have worked in education in the past, but we have to also recognise that we don't have the tools to do everything. I mean, having said that, we do a lot of work in higher education. We have a programme called Erasmus+, through which we can make available support for postgraduate students to go and study in European universities, and that's something that I'm pleased is getting a lot of interest, a lot of traction in Fiji.
So I'm grateful for that. That's also open for other Pacific Island countries?
Indeed, yes.
And again, I'm sure all you need to do is visit the European Union website to get more information on it.
Yes. No, we've organised sessions at USP, in University of Fiji, in Fiji National University, and I think a lot of students now are conscious of the opportunities that are there.
Now, back to Europa Day. How is it going to be marked here in Fiji?
Well, there are a number of things that we are putting on. Actually, this morning I was quizmaster at an International Women's Association event, really? Which was good fun. It went very well. It was a quiz about Europe. And again, raising awareness of the European Union. On Saturday, unfortunately, I was travelling back from the North Pacific, but last Saturday there was a beach cleaning exercise. Again, colleagues from the European Union delegation and members of the public played a part in cleaning up the foreshore very successfully. On the 8th of May, which is Friday, there is an amazing race for school kids around Suva. It's a sort of treasure hunt, so there'll be clues, there will be a route which they'll need to follow, and prizes at the end. There at the Suva Library there will be face painting, drawing and so on, so things for the younger kids. And then very importantly, on Saturday, on the 9th of May itself, we've teamed up with the USP to put on a real exhibition of the European Union's development cooperation in the Pacific. So we're working with partners such as the SPC, such as SPREP, the environmental agency, such as a number of NGOs that we work with. So there'll be displays, there'll be presentations and so on. I think that's a very good opportunity to really tell people about what we're doing.
What are the important areas that the European Union is looking at expanding?
Well, we're just about to begin a new regional program. I'm very pleased that our new commissioner, which is like a minister for international cooperation, will be visiting Fiji in mid-June. He will be coming here because there's going to be a parliamentary assembly organised which brings European parliamentarians to Fiji, and he will also be signing our new regional indicative programme with the Pacific in order to really fire the starting gun on our new cooperation programme, which carries a budget of 166 million euros. Which is about $400 million. That's for regional projects across the Pacific.
Right across the Pacific.
Yeah, and under that, we were putting a lot of resources into regional economic integration to help the different countries of the Pacific really to work better together in terms of opportunities for trade, opportunities for, let's say, speaking together in international fora and so on. We're working with the Pacific Island Forum, we're working with the SPC and so on, and there are a lot of opportunities, I think, for closer integration. If you work more closely together, you have a louder voice on the world stage. And that's something that the European Union has a great deal of experience in. And I think in the Pacific, there are lessons I think that we can helpfully bring to leaders here about how working together can benefit everybody and how really to go about closer integration.
Now, as the head of the European Union delegation, we're halfway through the year of 2015. I got to ask what it's been like for you.
2015 has been a busy year. All years are busy. I think one of the big challenges for us here at the delegation of the European Union is working with 15 countries and territories, which means we spend a lot of time in the air. We spend a lot of time visiting different countries, different islands. It's a very, very rewarding experience, and I am grateful that I have such an interesting job. But it does mean that there are an awful lot of things going on at the same time. In Fiji, it's been a fascinating last 6 months since the elections. So much has happened, and it's a real privilege to be here at this time and to really be working closely with the government as things move forward and providing support.
Thank you again for coming and joining us on the show. And good luck for the rest of the week.
Thanks a lot, and happy Europe Day to everybody. Thank you.
Welcome back to Gold FM Speak Your Mind. And we continue our discussion on the protection of the child in our Fiji and looking at the various functions. And we're speaking with Constable Mosi Ulula Kemba from the Juvenile Bureau of the Fiji Police Force. Now, just before the break, we also cleared up a few issues regarding traditional practices in relation to the offences done against a child. Now, let's look at the method of reporting and looking at, we have received questions here on Gold FM. Who is qualified to report child abuse, and can they report even when they suspect there is case of child abuse within a family and even within a community?
Thank you, Pedeli. There is no requirement for reporting.
Mm-hmm.
You do not really need a certain qualification to, when you suspect there is suspicion, you can report to any of these professionals that I had mentioned earlier: teachers, legal practitioners, a police officer, social welfare officer, and a medical officer.
Okay.
You can report. Now, the child welfare decree has two sections. They have two provisions. One is the confidentiality clause in section 9, and also in section 10 it has a liability. So when a person reports, the law protects the person. The information will not be released.
Okay.
Yeah, and if one of the professionals releases the information, is liable for he's committing an offense. He's committing an offense, and liability, you will not be if you reported in good faith, about this suspicion, or you actually saw, or you believe that there is a situation that a child is going to be harmed, even before being harmed, and you report in good faith, the liability clause protects you. You will not be liable for any legal or civil action or any administrative process. So it protects people, because it encourages people to speak for children.
Right.
Because children, they can be assaulted and abused, they can be facing certain harms, but they cannot speak out. So the law is simply, it's child welfare decree. It is for the welfare of children. It's not there so we can start pointing at parents. It's just trying to raise that awareness that children need to be protected, and there are all other alternatives of disciplining or teaching children, and not by abusing them.
Now, when we speak of the level of abuse, everyone assumes that it's always physical abuse, but there's more to it.
Yes, abuse. It normally comes in four forms. Four general forms. One is the physical abuse. Physical abuse, that is the actual physical abuse that happens to a kid. Then there is a sexual abuse. Abuse that is a result of a person's own craving, sexual craving. They don't need to necessarily have carnal knowledge. Maybe just some of them just need to see children naked, and they get that
They're aroused.
This satisfaction from it. That is sexual abuse. And then you have psychological or emotional abuse. This is the kind of abuse that we don't normally see. We don't see marks, but psychological, it affects the way a child sees and emotions, the feelings, how the person feels about themselves. And these are normally infected by words. When we tend to differentiate between two kids in a house, and we tell them you're a stupid kid, so full of this and that, and just look at you, you are not that developed, you're so fat, you're so ugly, and it begins to hurt the kid psychologically. And it is one of the dangerous forms of abuse, because when children grow up, most of them tend to reflect behaviors or actions that when we see them, we want to deal with them harshly, but we fail to realize that there is a hurt that is now coming out.
To be very honest, this is quite common practice.
It's one of the common practice that we have.
Yes.
We tend to hear people probably abusing their children.
I mean, it was done, for many of us.
Yes.
It was done when we were growing up, and we accept it also as normal.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
And emotional abuse. And then the other form is neglect. Neglect, it is also a form of abuse, because our care, our standard of care falls below the expected standard of care. So if you look at the law, there are some parents being taken to court because their children drowned, or their children was involved in an accident. Okay, in every offense there has to be two elements, the conduct that we see, and then we need to couple that with the state of the mind. Okay, so no parent raises a kid to die, but when a child dies, considering the age is below 14, and the parents neglected their duty of care under the crimes decree. The crimes decree, while we are mandated by the child welfare decree to report as professionals, the crimes decree, there is in section 240, talks about duty of care. The duty of care, it mandates everyone covered under that section, and that is the household head of a kid that is under 14, also for caregivers. There are all these people that are covered. People who own certain things, maybe like a pool, maybe like a vehicle, never check the vehicle in reverse, or you never cover the pool properly before you, and it's filled with water. So these are all people who have a duty of care. And duty of care, that's a legal term. It's a duty of law. The law requires you, that this is your duty. And when a child loses his life, maybe by drowning or was involved in an accident, and upon investigation, we find that the parent, it was negligence. The state of mind was negligence, never cared. So the child just lost a life, which could have been prevented. The parent could be looking at manslaughter, arising out of breach of duty of care.
How many years could that?
The maximum imprisonment is 25 years for that offense, and that depends on the court. It depends on the court, and it's very sad if now some parents are appearing in court because of that. Because of that, for parents to need to understand something, that we may be biological parents, but there is something that every nation in the world is making laws that protects children. In some countries, they've taken it to another level by paying for children, all this stuff. It's called parents patria, and that system, it simply talks about the state as the first parent. So for every one of us here, we are first a child of the state, then the child of the. That is why when we cannot afford to go to the super private, your parent provides. When you need an education, a parent provides a school for you. That is the state as first parent.
Well, thank you very much for that clarification. I think we're going to go on to, we'll continue with this conversation again right after this short break here on Gold FM Speak Your Mind. You're back on Gold FM Speak Your Mind, and we continue to discuss the issue of violence against women. And, with me in studio still, the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. Now, let's talk about culture and the culture, our traditional cultures, as we say. We have, I'm often told that, we have these checks and balances in our culture. We have in the Toke culture the issue of the mbulumbulu, the process of mbulumbulu, forgiveness, asking for forgiveness, and quite often is utilized in cases of domestic violence. Now, how does this is a challenge to the work of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and how do you cope with it?
It is a huge challenge, and it used to be more of a challenge when we first started, because mbulumbulu was used for rape, for crimes committed against women and children mostly. No, it was used for that. And I always remember what Ratu Choni Mandraiwiwi said, a former judge and chief of this country. He said at a meeting that mbulumbulu is to bring about peace between the two. The law must take its course between the two families, but not to excuse the crime. In olden days, rapists were clubbed to death. Never mind. I mean, very little is written about this, but you can find bits and pieces here and there. They were clubbed to death, rapists, and the chief would order that. But the Mbulumbulu still took place. The Ndalo, the pigs, the Mets arrived. That was so the two sides don't continue the feud and and have wars and things like that. But he was put to death.
Yes.
But nowadays it's an abuse of that. It is to excuse the rapist and sometimes force the rapist to marry the survivor.
It's quite often that we find that culture is changed over the years to
has,
suit.
Yes, to suit the power holders.
Power holders.
Yes, the power holders. Yeah. So, but, before when we first started, it used to be used as a mitigating factor when in court, and we fought really hard against it, and so therefore it is now no longer used as a mitigating factor. But sometimes we have heard, we have been told, and we have found it out to be true, is some police officers will tell the rapist, just go do the mbulumbulu. And in one case, the police actually went with the rapist. It was a gang rape to take the mbulumbulu to the survivor's place. So that is against the law. You can report those kind of things. You should report those kind of things. So, and then if the woman decides not to leave, women know when they've had enough. They leave either when they are severely injured or the violence has gone on for too long and that she feels that it's harming her children, she's going to die one day and so on, So she knows when she will leave. And then the Ndalo and everything else comes. The male members of the guy's family, he's looking very crestfallen and, very sad and stands there like poor boy. And then everybody else says, you're disrespecting culture if you don't go back. And the woman saying, no, I don't want to go, kind of thing. And they send her back. And that pressure, the cultural pressure is there. But I'm glad to see that less and less of that is happening. But in the rural areas, some of that practice still continues. I mean, why we talk about rural, in the Lami area, we've had recent case, and so it's around here also. It depends on the police station. It depends on the people who are there, and also it depends on the community who are and how aware they are of the situation. The more awareness, the less of this is happening.
As much as the work that the Fiji Women's Crisis does in a community level, how do you feel about those who have started with village rules, regulations, and that restricts, or who say that they have laws and regulations that will now discourage crimes such as rape, and how do you feel about the village bylaws that have yet to be enacted but have actually been in practice in some places?
Yes. Village bylaws have their place, and it's for non-criminal offenses, I think. I believe that's what. Somebody damages us, somebody's pig damages your cassava plantation, and how you bring about reconciliation and things like that. But we don't believe that for criminal offenses like child sexual abuse, domestic violence, rape, and sexual, those are not to be reconciled within that. In fact, women should be encouraged. And with the zero tolerance zones, zero tolerance to violence, that is an avenue that we can use if we make it work properly and effectively. That is one of the ways in which we can encourage more reporting, and which will then discourage these incidents. Everybody on the same page, saying this is wrong and this is how this is how we're going to address this. But when you force women to reconcile, when you force women to forgive and to take the mbulumbulu, that is wrong, and that can be a criminal offense. The other one is when you start saying that women should behave themselves in the village, so therefore do not wear pants, not wear pants. Yeah. And it even goes to the extent of they can't wear pants in town, or have them wininga only wherever you are.
Not to have your hair tied back.
Tied back and straightened and things like that.
Cut short.
Yes, so those kind of things. When you start restricting women's behavior, then you will see an escalation in violence. That I know in a village, and where this kind of rules were made, and women, and it is a very metropolitan town, like it's a jet set town. I'll say it. It's a jet set town, where women are going out to work in the tourism industry. They're in the salespeople, in the in the handicraft and all that. And so they wear the skirt and blouse. And there were guys who were waiting outside of the village, and they were threatening violence on these women if they did not change their clothes before entering the village. So that kind of ridiculousness. And my niece went into the shop that is next to the village, and she was told that she could not wear that short skirt. Do you know when you enter this village, you have to wear long skirts and things. So that is like, the threat of violence is there. People were actually threatened, things like that. So you cannot do that. That's against the law. That's against their basic human rights. Of course, there are social etiquettes that, we don't wear shorts and things, run around in the middle of the village. Just like we're lying down in our home here. I mean, if I'm in Tamavua lying down in my home, in my Sulu, and shorts or something, and somebody comes, I'll quickly put something around and go. You will put on a shirt if you, that kind of thing. So those are just etiquette. It's not like a rule. And the reason they gave us was if women wear pants, it attracts rape. And that is just a whole load of nonsense.
How do you feel with the criticism that is also leveled against you when you go out to communities that say that the type of work that you do is a threat to the culture?
Yeah. We heard that a lot before, but we have proven ourselves now. It's the men who want us in the villages now to raise awareness and so on. In fact, some of the traditional women's groups are now saying we are interfering with culture. There's a recently that I have heard, so I don't know where this is coming from.
Did they explain?
I don't know, yeah. No, because this is supposed to be kept hush-hush.
Okay.
And kept hush-hush, and we don't talk about it like the way we are talking about it.
We'll continue again. It's getting a little more interesting now on Gold FM Speak Your Mind.